I'm Harrison Graham. We've got some NFL trade rumors that I want to dive into on today's Verts episode. Be sure to subscribe for daily and free NFL content. Here on Verts, Brandon Aiyuk, for the second straight offseason, appears to be caught up in the trade rumor mill as rumors have been circulating around his status. Obviously, last year, different situation. He wanted a new contract. 49ers seemed non-committal. Eventually, they budged and paid him in training camp before the season. And then, of course, he tears his ACL and MCL. So just kind of ended up turning into a disaster for San Francisco, who's clearly been cutting cost this offseason with the moves that they have made. Now, an important note here on that topic is on April 1st, Aiyuk is due a $22.8 million roster bonus. So if they were going to trade him, you would think they'd try to do it in the next week. Now, could they trade him after that? Could they do a post-draft trade as well? Sure, it's not like they can't afford the roster bonus, but they've been cutting costs, not necessarily from a cap standpoint, but from a cash flow standpoint this year. Last year, they spent over $330 million in cash. This year, they're at like $225 right now. So kind of feels like they're scaling back as an organization for a year, in a year that could be a transition season for them. If they trade him, his cap hit actually goes up $8 million for this year. But if they do it before the roster bonus, from a cash flow standpoint, they could benefit moving forward, and maybe next year they get more aggressive. They got to pay Brock Purdy. All that stuff are things they have to consider. I do think whether their fan base agrees, whether even I necessarily agree or disagree, I think the 49ers feel like they made a mistake in how they handled this last year. I think if they could go back and do it again, they would have traded Brandon Aiyuk before the draft. I think they got caught up in the fact that he had a career year. They were literally a play from winning the Super Bowl over the Kansas City Chiefs, and they viewed 2024 as like, we got to keep the band together. We got to try and make a run at this thing. And Aiyuk and his agent kind of bent the 49ers over a barrel, and they eventually budged. Like I said earlier, if they could do it again, they would not have done that. They would have traded him. They already had Debo under a big contract. Maybe Debo would still be here, or maybe they'd have flexibility to have gone out and maybe signed a Devontae Adams, whatever the case may be. I think that's one of those revisionist history deals where they would not have paid Aiyuk. They would have traded him for like a second-round pick to Pittsburgh or whoever, and then drafted Ricky Pearsall and maybe a second guy, or draft somebody this year to replace him. But they didn't do that, and now it looks like they could be considering trading him elsewhere, which is going to be tough because his value now is certainly less than what it was a year ago. Why? Not because he's necessarily a worse player, but he's got a major injury, torn ACL and MCL, plus other ligaments reportedly. That could be tough to come back from, especially for this season. And he costs a lot more money. He signed a 4-year, $120 million deal with $75 million guaranteed. Now, the Niners have already paid $43 million of that guaranteed, so a team trading for him, I think it's a calculated risk if you get him for the right value. And that brings us to a team that's been rumored to be interested. They were interested last year. They offered a second-round pick in Amari Cooper, which, again, if you're the Niners, you probably would have just done that if you could redo it. And now the Cleveland Browns, at least rumor-wise, appear to be interested again. There's not a lot of hardcore reporting on this one, just kind of the internet rumor mills, so take that for what it's worth. But we know they've been interested before. They don't really have a true number one receiver. They have Jerry Jeudy, who's a really good number two, and the chatter is that they would trade a third or a fourth-round pick for San Francisco. If it were me and I'm the Niners and I'm concerned about Aiyuk's future after the injury, if a third's on the table, that's kind of a no-brainer. I would just trade him and just reset at the position. You've got Juwan Jennings, you got Pearsall, draft somebody in the second or third round, and just go from there. Now, I think a few other teams make sense. The New England Patriots still have a ton of cap space. They could easily trade for Aiyuk from a financial standpoint, and they just don't have good receivers. I mean, how much help are you going to get Drake May? Because they haven't gotten him much. They signed Morgan Moses to play right tackle. They need a left tackle. They need multiple receivers. They could upgrade at running back. I think New England would be a calculated risk from their standpoint. The Raiders don't have a true number one. They have Brock Bowers at tight end, Jacoby Myers. They could still use a receiver. I doubt a Jim Harbaugh-led team would trade for Brandon Aiyuk, but he would instantly be their number one receiver when healthy. So wanted to go ahead and mention them as well. But we'll see what happens here. April 1 feels like a soft deadline. I don't think it makes it impossible to trade him after that, but if you're the Niners and you're going to pay him that roster bonus, do you really want to pay him $23 million and then not have him on your team this year? That seems like a tough sell. Where will Brandon Aiyuk play in 2025? You think it's San Francisco? Type SF. Think it's someone else? Predict below in the comments for us. Is it the Browns? Is it the Chargers? Is it another team that we didn't mention? My gut tells me he'll stay in San Francisco because the trade value probably just won't be there. And you're trying to truly evaluate Brock Purdy, right? I think having Aiyuk on the team is going to give him the best chance at success. Okay, Trey Hendrickson. Could he hold out for the upcoming season if he does not get a new deal? Well, Jeremy Fowler, ESPN, certainly reported that could be the case, saying he would, quote, strongly consider holding out with a new deal. Here's what Fowler had to say. Quote, sometimes you hear players say, well, I'll just sit out this year, and it's posturing, kind of like Brandon Aiyuk last year. I actually think he would strongly consider sitting out and possibly do it if they don't get a deal done, because $16 million this year is just not quite enough compared to where it should be. And look, if I'm Trey Hendrickson and they don't give me a raise, I'm not playing this year. And I'm sure I'm almost 100% of the time team, hey, man, you signed a contract, you got to go out and play. Dude, he's going to be 31 this year. This is it. This is his last chance to get a big contract. And $16 million a year is a joke compared to where the edge market has gone. He's been arguably the best pass rusher the last 2 years in the NFL. I think the Bengals are in a tough spot. I really do. I think in a perfect world, they would have paid Jamar Chase, Trey Hendrickson, traded T. Higgins, tag and trade him. But then it came out and it was reported that Jamar wasn't going to sign without T getting a new deal. And Joe Burrow put the pressure on the franchise, which I don't blame him for doing because he saw what happened to Carson Palmer in the 2000s when they wouldn't pay to keep players around him. So, I'm not blaming Joe Burrow, but, it's one of those deals where you're going to pay 3 major contracts in the same offseason for a team historically who doesn't give out big deals. I always felt like that was a tough sell, but I thought the 2 to keep were Chase, because he's Burrow's guy, number 1 receiver. That's a no-brainer. Hendrickson, who's by far your best defensive player, and he's a pass rusher, trading T. Higgins for a second, third-round pick. I felt like that was the ideal path for Cincinnati, draft a receiver in day 2 to replace him, and obviously they didn't do that, and it didn't seem like they really had much of an option there. So I think now you get to this situation where they were optimistic about getting a new deal done with Trey Hendrickson, but it just may not be possible with how much the edge market has exploded. And Fowler also adds that the Bengals have gotten a ton of trade interest, but they haven't gotten that wow package. They want a hefty trade package for Hendrickson, which is going to be difficult to get because not only would a team have to pay big capital, I assume Cincinnati wants a first-round pick plus more, but then they have to pay him north of $35 million per year, which I think that part of it is probably pretty easy for teams, but trading a first plus more, then paying a 31-year-old edge rusher $35 plus million per year on at least a 2, if not a 3-year extension, that becomes tougher for these general managers. That's a very aggressive move to make if you are the Commanders or whoever else could be in position to trade for him. And I don't think this helped either. When Danielle Hunter got a 1-year, $35.6 million extension, a really, really good player, but probably not as good as Trey Hendrickson, that really set Cincinnati back because I bet when those negotiations resumed, they were like, all right, man, look, Myles Garrett got $40 a year, but he's probably the best edge rusher in the league. He's also a couple years younger than you. How about 3 for $100, 33 and a half? Well, now Hendrickson is saying, I'm worth at least $35 million. I'm better than Danielle Hunter. I just am. That's what him and his camp are saying, I would have to imagine. So, I think Cincinnati could be stuck here. I think the longer this plays out, the more I think he gets traded. I know there was optimism last week about getting him done too, but if he's not going to take a discount, which why should he? I just think it's a tough sell that Cincinnati is going to get him inked on paper as well. And look, if it ends up being they just got the 2 receivers done, hey, that's more than they've done in the past. But again, I think as time goes on, This setup where you pay two receivers major money. I know the cap's going up, but not many teams do that. And I know you could say, well, the Eagles just won the Super Bowl. They have two high paid receivers. Yeah, but will they long term? In the way Howie structures those deals, and their owner has a lot more cash, which means they can just pay huge signing bonuses up front to keep those cap hits down. That's not Cincinnati. That's not the situation they have. So we'll see if they can complete the trio. If they can do it, more credit to them. It's still not improving the team because they already had all three of these players. But my gut tells me, like, I'll say this: I'll believe it when I see it. When it comes to also paying Trey Hendrickson a major contract. Now, what will the Bengals do with Hendrickson? Type T for trade or P for pay? Last week, it seemed like they were on track to an extension. I'm going to say they end up trading him. That's what my gut's telling me. So we'll see where it goes. We'll, of course, have it all monitored and covered here on 4Verts as storylines continue to emerge. My name is Harrison Graham. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. We will be back with another episode tomorrow.